So I've been asked to read my favourite Mr. Man book. Okay, see if you can guess what it is. When I was a little girl, I was in hospital quite a lot. I broke my arms 11 times. I fractured my skull. I broke my leg. I was very, very clumsy and I used to bump into things a lot. My favourite Mr. Man book is Mr. Bump, Mr. Bump. So I've got two. So I'm going to put one down here and read it, and I'm going to keep one showing you the pictures. Okay. So let's get ready. Okay. This is the sad story of Mr. Bump. The trouble was that Mr. Bump just could not help having little accidents. If there was something for Mr. Bump to bump into, he'd bump into it all right. For instance, if you were to see Mr. Bump out walking down a street in your town and there happened to be something to bump into down that street, then you know what would happen, don't you? What's going to happen? Bump. Mr. Bump bumped into it. Mr. Bump was just the same at home. He lived in an extremely nice home, but even there he couldn't help having those little accidents. For instance, one morning when Mr. Bump went outside his house, he noticed that the chimney pot had come loose in a storm the night before. I must fix that before it falls off, thought Mr. Bump to himself, and he hurried to his garden shed to fetch a ladder. It was a very long ladder. Mr. Bump walked up to the garden path with his ladder on his shoulder. He turned the corner of the garden path. Crash went the living room window. Oh dear, thought Mr. Bump, and he turned to see what happened. Crash went the kitchen window behind him. Oh dear, thought Mr. Bump again, and he rested the ladder against the wall of the house so he could climb up on the roof to mend the chimney pot. Crash went the bedroom window. So you can see how Mr. Bump had his little accidents. Mr. Bump had many jobs, but somehow they never seemed to last very long. As soon as anything got lost or broken or splintered or chipped or snapped or cracked or torn or burst or wrenched or crunched or split or slit, Mr. Bump got the blame. For instance, when Mr. Bump worked on a farm, he tripped over the farm dog and spilt the milk, which he was carrying for the farmer's wife, and which the farm cat then lapped up. For instance, when Mr. Bump was a postman, he got his hand stuck in the pillar box and he had to fetch the fire brigade to come and set him free. For instance, when Mr. Bump was a bus conductor, he fell off the bus and he couldn't catch it again, and all the passengers travelled along without paying. For instance, Mr. Bump was a carpenter and he found out that when he was hammering nails, he hammered his thumb most of the time and the nail hardly at all. Right, I'm going to stop it there and see what happens next. Okay, and I will see you in the second part of the video. Take care.